What if everything you were taught about success is wrong? What if the very mindset of never give up, push harder, take control is the very thing that's keeping you stuck? It sounds absurd, maybe even offensive, in a world that worships hustle culture, glorifies control, and equates rest with laziness. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The tighter you grip, the more life slips through your fingers. The harder you chase, the further it runs. We've been taught to micromanage our destiny, to plot, plan, predict every step. But somewhere along the way, we forgot something deeper. Life is not a machine to be dominated. It's a mystery to be danced with. In this episode, we're going to challenge everything you think you know about effort, ambition, and control. We're going to talk about surrender, not as weakness, not as passivity, but as a powerful, conscious choice. A way of living that doesn't scream, "I've got this," but whispers, "I trust." So if you're tired of chasing, forcing, fixing, if the pressure to make it happen is stealing your joy, stay with me, because what you've been running after all this time, it might already be trying to reach you. You just have to stop getting in the way. 1. Letting go versus giving up, the strength of the open hand. We've confused letting go with giving up. We think surrender means weakness, like walking away, like failure, like not trying hard enough. But real surrender? It's one of the most courageous acts a human being can commit to, because it requires faith, not in fantasy, but in the deeper rhythm of life. Imagine your hand clenched tightly into a fist. Strong, right? Protective, determined, but it's also closed. Nothing new can enter. Nothing nourishing can be held. Now picture that same hand open. Soft, receptive, still strong, but in a different way. That is surrender. Sarah learned this the hard way. She was an artist who did everything right. Built her portfolio, worked non-stop, networked like mad. Her days were filled with strategy, self-promotion, metrics. But her art, it felt heavy. Her life, exhausted. No matter how hard she pushed, the door wouldn't open. Until one day, something in her broke. Or maybe softened. She stopped chasing success and went back to creating for the joy of it. Not for galleries, not for growth, just to feel alive again. And that's when it happened. A gallery owner, wandering unplanned, discovered her work and saw its honesty. She was offered a solo show. No pitch deck. No cold email, just presence and art that breathed. You see, she didn't stop dreaming. She just stopped suffocating the dream. And maybe that's the difference. Letting go doesn't mean abandoning your path. It means releasing your obsession with how and when it must unfold. It means showing up without strangling the process. It means trusting, as the Stoics taught, that we control our actions but not the results. Don't seek for things to happen as you wish, Epictetus said, but wish for things to happen as they do, and you will find peace. Letting go is not giving up. It's growing into a wiser kind of participation. One that says, I plant the seed, I water it, I wait, but I don't keep digging it up every hour to see if it's growing. So ask yourself, where in your life are you gripping too tightly? What are you trying so hard to control that it's stopped breathing? Maybe, just maybe, the strength you need isn't in holding on, but in learning how to let go, gracefully, deliberately, so your life can breathe again. 2. Resistance, the invisible force that keeps you small. Not all prisons have bars. Some live in our minds, silent, subtle, and deadly to our growth. It's called resistance. That invisible weight we feel just when we're about to do something meaningful. It shows up in whispers. Don't bother. What if it's not good enough? What if you fail? Sometimes it wears the face of exhaustion. Other times it hides behind busyness. You find yourself cleaning your kitchen, scrolling endlessly, answering emails. Everything except the one thing that actually matters. Sound familiar? That's resistance. Not as laziness, but as fear in disguise. Think of Adam, a writer with a dream that pulsed in his chest. He had talent, time, even clarity. But every time he sat down to write, anxiety flooded his mind. His heart raced. His inner critic screamed. So instead of writing, he reorganized his bookshelf. He tweaked outlines. He did everything except write. But here's the thing. Resistance doesn't show up where nothing matters. It shows up right at the edge of transformation. It's not a signal to retreat. It's a sign you're on to something real. If it scares you, says Stephen Pressfield, it might be a good thing to try. The Stoics knew this too. They taught that obstacles aren't detours, they're signals. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." So what if resistance isn't your enemy, but your compass? When you feel stuck sabotaging small, pause. Ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of? What's this resistance trying to protect me from? Maybe it's the fear of being judged, of not being enough, or the deeper fear that even if you try your best, you might still fail. And that would hurt more than not trying at all. But here's the truth. Resistance will always be there. It's part of the human condition. What matters is whether you let it dictate your choices. Surrender in this context doesn't mean give in to fear. It means stop fighting fear as an enemy. Recognize it. Sit with it. Move anyway. Like Adam eventually did. He wrote, not from confidence, but from honesty. And in doing so, he stopped waiting for resistance to disappear and started dancing with it. So today, don't try to defeat resistance. Understand it. Talk to it. Then walk forward, not in fear, but with it. That's courage. And that's what reclaiming your path really looks like. 3. Talking to resistance, a letter from the shadow. There's a voice inside you that you rarely speak to. It doesn't shout. It whispers. It hides behind logic, responsibility, even discipline. But at its core, it's afraid. That voice is resistance. And here's the truth. You can't silence it by force. You have to listen. Not to obey, but to understand. What if you wrote it a letter? Literally. What if you sat down and gave it the mic? Let it speak, not to shame it, but to hear it. It might say things like, if you really try and fail, we won't survive the shame. If you shine too brightly, they'll tear you down. If you change, you'll lose them. You see, resistance is never random. It's a protector. It shows up where the stakes are real, where your soul is on the line, and it thinks it's keeping you safe. But safety at the cost of becoming who you are, that's a quiet kind of death. So after it speaks, right back. Not to argue, not to conquer, but to reassure. Say, I hear you. I know you're scared, but I'm not here to stay stuck. I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be honest. This is where the shift happens. When you stop calling yourself lazy, unmotivated, broken, and realize it's not laziness. It's fear. And fear needs compassion, not punishment. The Stoics didn't avoid fear. They studied it, sat with it. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." So talk to the fear. Bring it into the light. Because what we name, we disarm. There's power in that. And freedom. Because once you hear resistance clearly, you can finally choose, not from panic, but from presence. You move not in spite of fear, but with it by your side, quietly, bravely, step by step, toward the life that's been calling you all along. 4. From pressure to presence, the quiet shift that changes everything. We're taught to hustle, to force, to push forward no matter what. But pressure has a cost, a hidden one. It tightens the breath. It hijacks our clarity. It replaces intention with anxiety. We think pressure drives progress, but more often it suffocates it, like trying to grow a tree by yanking on its branches. You don't help the seed by shouting at it to bloom. You help it by nurturing the conditions, then stepping back. That's the power of presence. The Stoics knew this. They didn't see peace as passivity. but as precision. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." You see, pressure is rooted in fear. Fear of falling behind. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being forgotten. But presence is rooted in trust. Trust that we don't need to rush what's real. Trust that our energy is better spent on showing up fully than sprinting blindly. Think of it like this. When you act from pressure, you act from desperation. You're trying to outrun some imagined failure. You're moving to escape something, not to create something. But when you act from presence, the quality of your action shifts. You're no longer proving. You're participating. It's the difference between shouting into a storm and listening for when the wind is ready to carry your words. This doesn't mean we stop taking action. It means our actions become aligned. We're not frantic. We're focused. We don't dig the seed up every day to check on it. We plant. We water. We wait. And we trust. Presence allows you to act without tension, to move without self-judgment, to give your best effort and still sleep peacefully, because you're not obsessed with the outcome. You're devoted to the process. So pause and ask yourself, where are you still moving from fear? Where have your goals become deadlines instead of devotions? Can you shift just a little into presence? Can you choose to respond instead of react? Because when you do, something shifts, quietly but deeply. You stop measuring your worth by speed. You stop confusing burnout with commitment. You stop chasing. You start aligning. That's where the magic begins, not in pressure, but in presence. 5. Trusting the universe, when letting go is what brings it closer. Most of us were raised to believe that life rewards control. That if we plan meticulously, act relentlessly, and never let go of the wheel, we'll get where we're supposed to be. But what if that belief is exactly what's holding us back? What if life isn't a machine to engineer, but a current to trust? Think of Maya. She wasn't lazy. She did what the world told her to do. Read every book on purpose, took career quizzes, created 5-year plans so detailed they looked like business proposals. But something always felt off. No spark, no joy, just check boxes and quiet frustration. Until one day she stopped, not out of defeat, but out of exhaustion. And in that silence, she did something radical. She listened, not to experts, not to trends, but to herself. She paid attention to what moved her, subtle things. Not what looked good on a resume, but what felt alive in her chest. She followed the glow, not the goal. One small decision at a time. And almost without realizing it, a year later, she was doing work that didn't just pay the bills. It fed her soul. Not because she forced her way into it, but because she aligned with it. This is what trusting the universe looks like. It's not spiritual laziness. It's spiritual maturity. It's realizing there's an intelligence greater than your to-do list, a timing deeper than your schedule. Seneca once said, "Time discovers truth." The truth is, some things aren't meant to arrive when you want them. They're meant to arrive when you're ready. But readiness isn't just a checklist. It's an energetic state, a vibration, a way of being. The universe doesn't respond to force. It responds to frequency. And when you shift from frantic striving to calm alignment, from gripping the outcome to honoring the unfolding, you begin to notice something strange. What you were chasing starts finding its way to you. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped clinging. Trust isn't passivity. It's participation with presence. It's being alert to the subtle nudges. It's being open to a different path than the one you planned. And it's remembering that sometimes, not getting what you want is the clearing that makes space for what you need. So pause. Breathe. Where are you still measuring your progress by someone else's clock? Where are you mistaking delays for dead ends? Maybe, just maybe, you're not late. You're right on time. And when the moment is right, when you're right, things will move faster than you ever imagined. Not because you pushed harder, but because you finally let life catch up to you. 6. Letting go of expectations, the unseen weight that blocks your peace. We don't just carry dreams. We carry scripts, unwritten stories about how life should look, by when, and in what form. And when life doesn't follow that script, we feel betrayed. Not because life failed us, but because it didn't obey the story we wrote in silence. That's the quiet weight of expectations. They seem harmless, just hopes, right? But unchecked, they become demands. Demands for control, for perfection, for timelines that don't belong to us. And slowly, almost invisibly, they strangle our peace. Think of Emily. She expected her promotion by 30, expected marriage by 32, expected happiness by 35. But at 36, she found herself burned out, single, questioning everything. Not because her life lacked value, but because her expectations refused to see the value in where she was. Every should became a shame. Every milestone missed became a measure of failure. But here's what she eventually realized. The pain wasn't in her life. It was in the story she kept telling herself about how her life was supposed to unfold. That story was never hers to begin with. We inherit expectations from culture, from family, from comparison. We mold our goals not from what moves us, but from what validates us. And in doing so, we disconnect from the present moment, the only place joy actually lives. The Stoics warned us about this trap. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." Your suffering doesn't come from what is. It comes from what you thought should be. So what happens when you let go? Not of vision, but of the obsession with form and timing. You become lighter, more available to the life that's actually happening. You stop seeing deviation as failure and start seeing it as redirection. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start relating to life honestly. It means you show up with devotion, but without demand. Because when your joy is tied to rigid outcomes, it's fragile. But when your joy is rooted in alignment, it's unshakable. So ask yourself, what timeline have you been married to? What stories have you been scripting so tightly that they've left no room for surprise? And what would it feel like to release them? Not because you've given up, but because you're finally ready to meet life as it is, not just as you wished it to be. That's not apathy. That's awakening. And in that awakening, you make space for what you never expected, but maybe what you always truly needed. 7. The power of stillness, where everything begins again. We live in a world that worships movement. Fast, loud, constant. We scroll, we chase, we plan. Stillness? That's for later, for monks, for when we've earned it. But what if we've been avoiding the very place our life begins? Stillness is not a pause between the real moments. It is the real moment, unfiltered, unperformed, unchaste. It's where clarity lives. It's where truth doesn't need to shout. But here's the paradox. Most of us are terrified of stillness, because in silence, there are no distractions left to blame. Only the truth we've been avoiding. We say we're too busy, but often we're just too uncomfortable with the quiet, because in stillness, the noise inside gets louder first. The doubts, the grief, the unmet dreams. But if you stay long enough, if you breathe through the noise, something else begins to rise. A deeper voice, one that doesn't push, doesn't panic. It just knows. That's the voice of your truest self. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That retreat is always available, but it requires intention. It requires permission. Think of your nervous system like a tightened bowstring, always pulled, always braced. Stillness is the hand that gently loosens the tension, not to stop the arrow, but to make the aim more true. You don't need hours. You don't need a mountaintop. You need 5 minutes, a breath, a moment where you close your eyes and simply witness. Not to fix, not to analyze, just to meet yourself exactly as you are. Let the thoughts come. Let them pass. Watch them, don't follow. Like clouds drifting across a vast sky. That sky is you. This is what surrender looks like on the inside. Not dramatic, not loud, but a quiet returning to presence. Because when you reclaim stillness, you reclaim choice. You stop reacting from chaos. You begin responding from clarity. You stop micromanaging life. You start listening to it. And that changes everything. So ask yourself, can you give yourself 5 minutes today, not to achieve, not to hustle, but simply to be? Because the more you return to stillness, the more natural surrender becomes. Not as a concept, but as a way of living, a way of being that doesn't fear the quiet. Because you've realized, that's where the real you has been waiting all along. 8. Control versus collaboration with life. The strength of letting the music lead. Control feels like power. Schedules, checklists, contingency plans. We cling to them as lifelines, convinced that if we can predict everything, we can avoid pain. But what if that control is the very thing keeping us from peace? The truth is, most of our obsession with control doesn't come from strength. It comes from fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of the unknown. So we try to hold life still. We manage, manipulate, micromanage. But life isn't still. It moves, it shifts, it breathes. And the tighter we grip, the more it resists. Think of dancing. When you try to lead every move, control every step, force every turn, you ruin the rhythm. But when you listen to the music, when you let the song lead, you begin to glide. That's not weakness. That's alignment. The Stoics never taught us to suppress life. They taught us to flow with it. Epictetus said, "Seek not that events should happen as you will, but let your will be that events should happen as they do." In other words, stop trying to drag life to your beat. Learn to hear its melody. This doesn't mean you abandon structure. You still plan. You still show up. But you stop needing everything to unfold according to your script. You stop confusing control with certainty and start building something more resilient. Responsiveness. Control says, "This must happen or I've failed." Responsiveness says, "Whatever happens, I will meet it with clarity." And that shift, it changes your nervous system, your identity, your ability to adapt, evolve, and breathe. Even when life turns sharply, control creates rigidity. Responsiveness builds flexibility. And flexibility isn't chaos. It's wisdom. So ask yourself, where are you holding too tightly? Where have your systems become cages, not containers? What would happen if, just for a moment, you stopped trying to conquer life and started collaborating with it? You'd soften, but you wouldn't collapse. You'd bend, but not break. And in that softening, you'd discover a truth more powerful than control. That life doesn't need you to dominate it. It needs you to dance with it. 9. Letting go transforms energy from grasping to receiving. There's a paradox we rarely talk about. The moment you stop needing something is often the moment it starts to appear. Not because life is testing you, but because letting go changes your energy. It's like unclenching a fist you didn't even realize was tight. Suddenly, your hands are open, ready to receive. You've probably felt it before. You chase, you push, you obsess, and somehow, everything feels further away. Then one day, in a breath of surrender, you let go. Not in defeat, but in relief. And things start to move. Opportunities you couldn't force your way into show up. People you stopped trying to impress finally notice. Ideas, solutions, and clarity arrive, not because you pushed harder, but because you got out of your own way. This isn't magic, it's alignment, because when you cling to an outcome, you broadcast lack. You send out a signal that says, I am incomplete without this, and the universe responds, not to your words, but to your state. But when you release that grip, you shift from grasping to grounded, from anxious to available. The Stoics understood this deeply. They separated desire from attachment. Wanting isn't wrong, it's human. But needing something so badly that your identity depends on it, that's suffering. Marcus Aurelius said, receive without pride, let go without attachment. Let that sink in. You can desire something deeply and still be free from dependence on it. That's where your true power begins. It's the difference between saying, I must have this or I'm nothing, and saying, I would love this and I'm whole either way. The first creates pressure. The second creates presence. So ask yourself, what are you gripping so tightly that it's blocking the flow? What would it feel like to pursue your dream without tying your worth to the outcome? Letting go doesn't kill ambition. It cleanses it. It separates purpose from performance. You still do the work. You still show up. But you stop chasing in desperation. You start moving in alignment. And in that shift, you don't just change your results. You change who you are while waiting for them. And that might be the most important transformation of all. 10. Surrender in relationships. The strength to let others be themselves. Love brings out the best in us, but it also brings out our deepest fears. Because where there is love, there is also the fear of losing it. So we do what we've been taught to do when we're afraid. We try to control, not always through domination. Sometimes it's subtle. The silent expectation, the unspoken should, the quiet pressure we put on the people we love to be more like us. We say it's love, but often it's fear wearing love's mask. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if they don't behave a certain way, we'll lose the connection we so deeply crave. But here's the truth. Control is not connection, and pressure is not presence. True love, the kind that lasts, the kind that heals, is born not from control, but from surrender. Not surrender as silence or submission, but surrender as space. Space for the other to be who they are, not just who you need them to be. Think of two hands, one gripping tight, trying to mold, the other open, offering trust. Which one do you feel safe in? The Stoics taught that we cannot control the actions of others, only how we respond. Epictetus said, you are not disturbed by what happens, but by your opinion of it. In relationships, surrender means we stop holding others hostage to our expectations. We express our needs, but we don't demand outcomes. We speak our truth, but we don't script their lines. Because when love becomes conditional, I'll love you if you make me feel safe, it stops being love. It becomes control in disguise. Surrender asks, can I love you, not just when you match my ideal, but when you challenge it? Can I allow you to be complex, evolving, imperfect, just like I am? This doesn't mean tolerating dysfunction. It doesn't mean staying silent in the face of harm. Surrender in love means we hold boundaries without closing our hearts. We walk away from what hurts, not because we stopped caring, but because we started caring for ourselves too. It's the courage to meet someone as they are, today, not who they were, not who we hope they'll become, but who they actually are now. That's presence. That's real connection. So pause for a moment. Where in your relationships are you gripping too tightly? Where are you rewriting someone else's role because their authenticity scares you? And what might change if you let go of the pressure, not the person? Maybe what you've been calling love has been performance. And maybe, just maybe, surrendering the performance is what allows real love to finally emerge. 11. The present moment, where life is actually happening. We spend so much of our lives anywhere but here. Our minds rehearse the past. What if I had said that? I should have done it differently. Or they rush into the future, What if this doesn't work? When will I finally feel okay? We plan. We worry. We manage imaginary outcomes. And in the process, we miss the only moment that's real. Now, this moment right here, this breath, this heartbeat, this space where your feet are touching the ground. It sounds simple, but don't mistake it for small. The present is not a pause between the big things. It is the big thing, because it's the only place where anything true ever happens. Joy, clarity, connection, healing. They don't live in someday. They live in now. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." He wasn't suggesting you abandon planning. He was inviting you to stop abandoning yourself. Because every time we chase a future we can't control, we lose touch with the life we're already in. And ironically, most of our suffering doesn't come from the moment itself. It comes from our resistance to it. We don't want to feel the uncertainty. We don't want to face the stillness. So we escape into noise, into action, into fantasies of better. But better doesn't live out there. It begins with being fully here. Presence doesn't mean perfection. It means permission. Permission to meet yourself honestly, right now, without needing to be anywhere else. Think of it this way. If your mind is a loud concert, then the present moment is the moment the music cuts, and all you hear is your own heartbeat. Not as a threat, but as a homecoming. That's surrender. Not to the noise, but to the now. Because when you're here, truly here, you begin to respond instead of react. You breathe deeper. You see clearer. You soften where you used to brace. And in that softening, peace returns. Not the peace of a perfect life, but the peace of not needing one to be whole. So ask yourself gently, where are you right now? Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, energetically? Are you here? Or are you lost in a story that doesn't serve you? If not, it's okay. Just come back to the breath, to the feeling of your chest rising and falling, to the simple truth, you are alive. This is your life. Not someday, not when, not if, now. And if you can surrender to this moment, you'll find it contains everything you were looking for in all the others. 12. Trusting yourself in the silence, the moment no one applauds. Surrender is beautiful in theory, but what about the moment no one sees you? No audience, no recognition, no applause, just you and a quiet decision that could change everything. There's a point on every path when the noise fades. The affirmations stop. The certainty vanishes. You're no longer fueled by feedback. You're guided by something deeper, self-trust. That's the moment most people turn back. Not because the dream isn't real, but because the silence feels like failure. But what if it isn't? What if the silence is where your roots grow deeper? Think of a tree in winter. No blossoms, no fruit. But beneath the surface, something essential is happening. It's strengthening its foundation for the season to come. That's you, not visible, but vital. The Stoics taught that virtue isn't proven by praise, but by presence. Seneca said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." So if you're in a season of friction, don't flee it. Let it sharpen you. Let it show you what you believe when there's no crowd to validate it. Self-trust doesn't scream. It whispers, keep going even now, especially now. Because if you can stay steady in the silence, if you can hold the vision without the noise, you don't just become someone who wants peace. You become someone who embodies it. And that changes how you show up forever. 13. The real power of surrender, not the end, but the beginning. So here we are, not at the finish line, but at the threshold of something truer. You came here thinking surrender was about giving up. But now you know, it's about showing up, fully, freely, without the weight of control. It's about releasing the need to force life, so you can finally flow with it. It's not passivity, it's presence. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the quiet confidence that says, I will meet whatever comes with open hands. The world may never teach you this. It will praise the grind, reward the noise, celebrate the sprint. But real power? The kind that holds when everything falls apart. It doesn't scream. It listens. It doesn't panic. It trusts. It doesn't grasp. It receives. And that power lives in you. Not someday. Not when the plan works out. Not when they finally see you. It lives in you now. In this breath. In this pause. In the quiet courage to say, I'm no longer here to chase what isn't mine. I'm here to welcome what already is. So if there's one thing to take with you, let it be this. You don't have to control everything to be okay. You don't have to have all the answers to take the next step. You don't have to wait for peace to arrive. You can choose it. Right here. Right now. And maybe that's the magic of surrender. It gives you your life back. Not because you gave up, but because you finally let yourself begin. If something in this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade into the noise of the next video. Pause. Breathe. Let it land. And if it spoke to you, really spoke to you, share it. Not just with a click, but with a conversation. Send it to someone who's been gripping too tightly. Someone who needs the reminder. They don't have to carry it all alone. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Not for numbers, but because this space is for people like you. People who want to live deeper, softer, freer. People learning to trade control for clarity, chasing for presence, noise for peace. Leave a comment. Tell me what part landed in your heart, what you're learning to release, what you're beginning to trust. Because surrender isn't something we master once. It's something we practice together. And this is only the beginning.